More than any other time previously that he's found himself in trouble, he appears to have run headfirst into political reality with a report from the Privileges Committee. And I think any chance of a comeback, particularly this side of election, looks increasingly remote.
I have to say I disagree. I think the Privileges Committee have actually overplayed their hand today by giving him 90 days. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter because he's resigned as an MP, but going up to 90 days has just made him more Boris the martyr rather than Johnson the villain. And, you know, it's actually created a lot more sympathy, more than's been publicly spoken by some MPs, but a lot more sympathy within the party. And the grassroots are outraged about it. You know, the Tory civil war, at least, that's going on will continue and continue.
But have you got any evidence for members being supportive of Boris Johnson, despite everything? See, I mean, it's quite a charge sheet, isn't it?
Well, I mean, from their perspective, he didn't do any of those things. You know, from a great deal of his supporters' perspective, he didn't do those things. But this has been a project right back from the referendum to portray Boris as a habitual liar and to, you know, discredit him and discredit Brexit.
It's nothing to do with Brexit or the referendum. And Boris Johnson, frankly, has been a habitual liar his entire career. He was sacked from one of his first jobs as a reporter on The Times for lying. He was sacked in one of his first front bench jobs from the Conservative Party for lying. He lies frequently. This place calls it misleading. But let's call it what it is. It's lies.
Look, you know, he's a hugely charismatic leader. In the end, this comes
He's a liar.
Well, I would disagree with that. And Express readers, I can promise you, don't think he's a liar. The messages we've been getting today from Express readers, from members of the Conservative Party, is that he's not a liar.
But have you been feeding them the lies that he's repeating?
No, not at all, not at all. You know, this is a guy who was elected in 2019 as a Prime Minister with a huge mandate and has been toppled by an establishment. That's rid of him.
That's the point, that he communicates with voters. He got that landslide. There's no one about who does that. I mean, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, they don't connect with voters in the way he did.
I think that's absolutely true, but the key word is did. He won this massive majority in 2019, as David rightly says. He was hugely popular, and then what did he do with it? He didn't deliver. He lied in office. He broke the law in office, and his popularity, which he had a unique opportunity back in 2019 to change this country, and many Conservative MPs feel he wasted it.
Well, actually, I would agree with you there, but probably in a different way. I think he did throw away his opportunity because he had a chance to bring in real Conservative policies and real Conservative values, and a lot of his critics, actually up to the point he resigned, were angry about that within the party.
Is now, with Boris Johnson's demise, his departure from this place, is the kind of swashbuckling populism he represented, is that over too? You've got managerial kind of, quiet competence from both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Now that's the style of politics now.
It is a style of politics, but also technocrat is no longer a dirty word in British politics. Not just because of Boris Johnson, but because of Liz Truss as well. And I think there are lots of people out there that are really worried about their mortgage interest rates, paying their bills, the price of their weekly shop, that think that everything that's going on in here just underlines that the politicians, the Conservative Party specifically, are obsessed with this infighting, this inward looking, and not concerned about the real issues that face them.
I have to disagree yet again, but I mean, I think technocrat is a dirty word in the sense, but what the hell is this government doing? What's happening? You know, there are no policies going through, they're ditching everything. We've got another rebellion coming next week on budgetary stuff, and they might ditch that as well.
But people no longer want to be entertained. They want to be served with decency.
At the moment, they don't want to be entertained, and yet the entertaining leaders always seem to make a comeback.
Well, is he unfit for office? From everything we've heard today, should he be prevented from ever returning to Parliament?
No, I think that would be wrong, and it would set a terrible precedent to bind future parliaments, and he's certainly not unfit for office. I could see him coming back in 4 or 5 years' time quite easily.
You agree with that? He should be allowed to make a comeback if...
Well, I don't think that anybody should bind future governments and future parliaments. I mean, that's the principle of it. That means that Boris Johnson has the capacity to come back, then so be it. Whether the public has the appetite, or indeed the Conservative Party at that point has the appetite, is another matter.
In terms of the splits, Pippa, how do you see that sort of split pretty irrevocable now?
I think as you get closer to a general election, parties tend to come together. The Conservatives have a reputation for being incredibly unified when it comes to, a moment of political necessity like an election. And that's one of the sort of strange things about all of this, is how disunified they are and how split they are when an election is just around the corner. But I suspect they'll see that the writing's on the wall. They'll recognise that they just don't have the capacity to change leader again before the next election. So they'll come in behind Rishi Sunak, whether they're fans of his or not, and many of them aren't, and they'll stick with him at least until the election. After that is the big question.
I think it's damage limitation now. Dave Kibbery-Smog actually has been talking a lot about this. It's damage limitation now. What they're looking at is who's going to be leader after a defeat at the next election. Not many of them really are thinking that they can pull it off next year or whatever. So, the interesting thing is, I think that next leader will need Boris Johnson's blessing. I don't think it will be Boris Johnson, but for obvious reasons, but I think he will need, or she will need, Boris's blessing.
So very similar to Donald Trump then, in
Indeed,
that case.
Yes.
David Maddox, Pippa Crerar, thanks very much.